I call it mocha flavored. It's called a minor 6/9 chord.
That's the one I call it that you have.
Yeah, it's in my my book. I think I've given you a copy of it, the Mystic Chord, Flavors of Jazz. There's also a version of it that's on Amazon, but I will give you copies of it at some point during the semester. Okay, and it's in the test materials, a lot of the stuff. So I know it's kind of like, okay, for some of you, it's like this is going right over my head, right? But it's okay. It doesn't hurt to be exposed to it, and just realize that certain chords evoke certain flavors or emotions, and that's a way that you can start to remember that. And then suddenly, when it clicked for me, I realized that jazz musicians, they use this certain shape, and it's the shape of a major 7/5 chord. This shape. But you use it with different roots, and it creates all these different flavors. So, but it's all the same shape, and even half diminished. Being half diminished. It's the exact same 4 notes. So when I realized that, when the half diminished was the kicker for me, because I knew the chocolate and strawberry thing, although I didn't call it that at the time. I was like, okay, because usually with dominant chords and jazz, if you see something written as C7, let's say you're the jazz piano player in your jazz band, okay? And you've done that, right?
Yes.
You get some chart put in front of you sometimes, probably,
Yeah.
and it says C7. You learn to know. I know I can't play just C7. It's not gonna really sound cool. So but you learn, okay, but if I play this basically what's called a B flat major 7/5 over the top of that, it's going to sound great. Or I can play an E 7/5, which has the sharp 9 sound, which is also sometimes called the Jimi Hendrix chord. So usually either that or the strawberry, one of those will work and will be, acceptable, and you don't get, kicked off the gig or something. So. You get paid. That's the objective, right? And called back again. So I found that, okay, I got those 2, but then when I realized that they're also using this for half diminished chord, because a long time I knew that like E half diminished is E, G, B flat, D. Okay? And that sounds pretty good in root position. But I noticed one of my buddies, he was playing a little different. I go, what are you doing there? He goes, oh, you just play E, A, B flat, D. He's playing the 4th of the chord instead of the 3rd. It's like, I didn't know you could do that, but by then I knew you can do whatever you want, right? So then I really realized why this shape is kind of magical. And there's a guy named Alexander Scriabin who back in the, I believe, 1800s, and he called it the Mystic Chord. It was built on all these different fourths like this. Was a synesthete, who's someone who thinks in terms of different senses. In other words, you hear it like associating a chord with a flavor or a sound with a color, okay? So I began to wonder, there's something up with that chord. And especially when I realized, hey, wait a minute, that's just a C13, sharp 11. And by this time I started to realize there's something with this particular organization of tones that makes it super, super versatile, okay, and useful. So that's why I call it the Mystic Chord, Flavors of Jazz. And the very first thing in the book talks about Alexander Scriabin and his Mystic Chord and how I sort of developed that into what I call my strawberry chord. Questions? Okay, one second. Okay, tell us who you are again.
I'm Lisa Messiah. Yes.
Yes.
You were talking about jazz, but aren't there like 10 different kinds of jazzes, like cool jazz versus smooth jazz versus straight ahead jazz, bebop jazz?
Right.
So, but you have a certain style of jazz.
Yeah, you're right. Jazz is a huge umbrella of styles. You know, you got smooth jazz, which is basically just R&B instrumental music. You know, you've got straight ahead jazz, like Wynton Marsalis and company. There's a sort of a straight ahead vibe or something that started in the 1940s and 50s and continues through today. In fact, you know, jazz kind of grew out of blues, which grew out of ragtime to a certain extent, which started around 1900. The great Louis Armstrong was born July 4th, 1900. He always said that anyway. I think it was actually a different day, but it's close enough, you know. And and by the way, there's never been another Louis Armstrong. You know, he's the only one, and great jazz trumpet player. But you know, then what happened in the then he started to have swing bands. In 1930s, they had what's called dancing cheek to cheek. You know, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. You know, heaven, I'm in heaven. Da, 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 da. And that's actually the song called Dancing Cheek to Cheek. And that was a bigger scandal, believe it or not. People dancing closely was a huge scandal, more so than what happened in the 50s with rock and roll. Because then you had Elvis Presley, and he's, gyrating his hips, and he was actually, on television they said, don't show him from below the waist, okay? Only the upper torso. It's against the, regulations of the television. So, and that was a huge, and most of you know that, that was, rock and roll has always been somehow a little scandalous or something that upsets parents and stuff like that. But the dancing cheek to cheek in the 30s was more of a scandal, believe it or not. But it wasn't as widely known about because we didn't have all the media and everything. But then when rock and roll started in 1950, what happened? A backbeat started happening. Boom, bap, boom, bap, boom, bap, boom, boom, bap. It made people crazy, okay? And they're still crazy because of that, okay? The jazz continued on. So